The warm sun spread its light across the wide desert land. Tall mountains stood in the distance, and the wind carried the soft sound of birds and moving grass. In this quiet corner of the Southwest, life moved slowly, but it was full of rules and old traditions. People in Ayana's tribe had followed those traditions for many generations. They believed that everything in their world, the land, the river, the wind, was connected. They respected their way of life and expected every person to follow it without question. Ayana was a young Apache girl with a calm smile and thoughtful eyes. She often walked to the river in the evenings when the air was cooler, her bare feet touching the soft earth. She loved the quiet of the water. When the river flowed, it made her feel free, like she could dream without limits. Ayana had always been different from others in her village. She asked questions, wanted to see the world beyond the hills, and often imagined a life where she could choose her own path. Not far from their land, a group of settlers had built a small wooden town. It was a place of horses, wagons, and smoke rising from chimneys. These settlers came from faraway places, bringing new ways of life that were very different from Ayana's tribe. The two groups did not trust each other much. They spoke different languages and had different beliefs. So even though they lived close, they kept their distance. Ayana had been warned all her life not to go near the settlement, but her curious heart often led her close to the edge of the land. One summer afternoon, as she followed the river farther than usual, she heard a strange sound, a soft tune being whistled. She stopped and carefully moved closer through the trees. On the other side of the water stood a young man wearing a white shirt and dusty boots. His name was Thomas. He worked on one of the nearby ranches. His hair was light brown, his skin sunburned from long days of work, and his eyes were kind. He was carrying a small bucket, collecting water for the horses. Ayana watched him quietly. She knew she should turn back. But something about the way he moved, calm, not hurried, made her stay a little longer. Suddenly, Thomas turned and saw her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other, unsure what to do. Then Thomas slowly raised his hand in a friendly wave. Ayana hesitated, then lifted her hand back, a small smile appearing on her face. It was the first time they saw each other, and even though it lasted only a few seconds, something gentle and new started to grow between them. Over the next few weeks, they met again and again by the river. At first, they said nothing, just exchanged smiles, simple gestures, and small waves. Thomas didn't speak her language well, and Ayana didn't speak his, but they learned little by little. She taught him simple Apache words, and he taught her English. Sometimes he brought apples from the ranch. Sometimes she brought small handmade beads from her village. They would sit on the smooth stones near the water and watch the sky change colors at sunset. Ayana felt something she had never felt before. Around Thomas, she didn't feel like she had to follow every rule. She could laugh freely, speak her thoughts, and dream out loud. Thomas, too, felt something special. His life had been made of long workdays, strict orders, and quiet nights. But when he saw her, his heart felt alive. They didn't talk about the future. They didn't have to. Just being near each other was enough. But the world around them was not simple. In Ayana's village, people noticed that she often disappeared at sunset. Her mother worried. Her father frowned but said nothing at first. The elders believed it was dangerous to go too far, especially near the settlers. Stories from the past still lived deep in their minds. Stories of misunderstandings and pain between their people and the outsiders. So when whispers started, they grew quickly. Where does she go every evening? Who is she meeting? The questions became louder each day. One evening, when the river reflected the pink sky, Thomas and Ayana sat close together, their shoulders almost touching. Thomas handed her a smooth stone he had carved into the shape of a small heart. Ayana smiled wide, holding it carefully as if it were something precious. Thomas didn't have many words, but the way he looked at her said more than any language could. Ayana's eyes softened. She had always believed that love was something quiet and pure, something that didn't need permission. In that moment, she felt that belief stronger than ever. Back in the village, however, a pair of watchful eyes had followed her. A young hunter from her tribe had seen her meeting Thomas. He returned to the village and told others what he had seen. Some were shocked. Some grew angry. They believed she was crossing a line that should never be crossed. When her father heard the news, his face turned pale. He loved his daughter deeply, but he also feared the power of tradition. In their tribe, certain rules were not just rules. They were like the air they breathed. The next day, Ayana noticed how the people in the village began to look at her differently. Women stopped talking when she walked by. Children whispered. The elders spoke quietly around the fire, their eyes hard and serious. Her heart began to fill with worry. She tried to stay calm and act as if nothing had changed. But in the evening, when she went to the river again, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. When Thomas saw her that evening, he noticed her quiet face. "What's wrong?" he asked softly. She didn't have the English words to explain everything, but she pressed her hand to her chest and shook her head. Thomas stepped closer, gently touching her hand. "We'll be okay," he whispered. And in that moment, even though she didn't understand every word, she understood the feeling behind it. As the summer days passed, their connection grew stronger, but so did the tension around them. People in the village spoke louder now. They said she was dishonoring their ways. They said she was forgetting who she was. Ayana tried to explain to her parents that her heart was her own, but their eyes filled with worry and silence. Her father warned her to stay away from the river. Her mother held her hand tightly at night as if afraid she might lose her. Thomas, too, felt the growing weight around them. Some men in the settlement had seen him walking toward the river. They asked questions he didn't want to answer. They warned him not to get involved with the people across the water. But Thomas was stubborn. He believed in what he felt, even when it scared him. He didn't want to give up. One night, when the moon was bright and the stars covered the sky like a blanket of light, Ayana ran to the river in tears. She had overheard the elders. They had decided to confront her. They said her actions brought shame. She didn't know what they would do next, but she was frightened. Thomas was already waiting for her, sensing something was wrong. When she reached him, she threw her arms around him. She couldn't speak, but the tears said enough. Thomas held her tightly. He wished he could take her far away, somewhere no one cared about the rules of old times. But he also knew the truth. This land belonged to her people, and leaving was not simple. They sat under the moonlight, holding on to the quiet moment as if it could last forever. Neither of them said goodbye. Neither of them admitted they were scared. But deep down, they both knew that a storm was coming. The next morning, Ayana woke to a village colder than ever. No one spoke to her. The elders gathered outside, their faces lined with firm decisions. Her father stood among them, his hands clenched. Ayana's heart pounded as she walked outside. She could feel the weight of their eyes on her. She wasn't just a girl anymore. She had become a symbol of something much bigger, something they thought they needed to control. As the day passed, she was told not to leave the village. But Ayana's heart could not be kept inside walls of fear. When the sun began to fall behind the hills, she slipped out quietly, moving through the shadows. She knew Thomas would be waiting at the river. Her feet moved fast, and the wind pressed against her face. When she reached the riverbank, Thomas saw her from the other side and came running. He knew by her eyes that this was no ordinary meeting. Ayana told him everything in broken words, with her hands trembling. She spoke of the elders, the anger, the silence of her father. Thomas felt his chest tighten. He didn't know how to fix it, but he knew he couldn't just walk away. "I'll protect you," he said quietly, holding her hand. His words were simple, but they carried a promise. In the distance, the sky began to turn dark. The sound of night animals filled the air. But behind the peaceful surface, something heavy was building. The elders had made their choice. And though Ayana didn't know every detail yet, her heart could feel it. Her love for Thomas had become something bigger than two people. It had become a test of loyalty, of courage, and of how far a heart could go for what it believed in. That night, Ayana and Thomas stayed by the river longer than ever. They didn't talk much. They just sat close, listening to the soft flow of the water. They both wished time could stop. But time never stops. It only carries everything forward. And far away, the village prepared for a day that would change both of their lives forever. The sun rose slowly over the desert the next morning. The sky was soft and pale, and the wind carried a quiet stillness that felt different. In Ayana's village, people were already awake. The elders sat together in a circle, their faces serious. Her father stood with them, his eyes heavy with worry. He loved his daughter more than anything, but he also believed that going against the elders would bring shame to their family. Everyone in the tribe had grown up hearing the same lessons. Never mix the old ways with the new. And in their eyes, Ayana had done just that. Ayana sat outside her family's small home, her knees pulled close to her chest. She could hear the elders speaking in low voices, but she couldn't understand every word. She didn't have to. The way people looked at her told her everything she needed to know. They no longer saw her as just a young woman. They saw her as someone who had crossed an invisible line. The quiet respect she once felt from them was gone, replaced by cold, distant stares. Her mother came to her side and gently brushed her hair back. "My child," she whispered softly, "sometimes the world does not understand the heart." Ayana leaned against her mother, her eyes burning with unspoken tears. She didn't want to bring pain to her family. She only wanted to love freely. But in this place, love came with rules, and rules came with consequences. That afternoon, Thomas stood near the river, pacing back and forth. His hands were restless, his heart uneasy. He had sensed something was wrong the night before, but now the silence on the other side of the river made him certain of it. He couldn't see her, and that made the world feel colder. He wanted to run into the village and find her, but he knew he couldn't. If he entered their land without being welcome, it would only make things worse. He had to wait, even though waiting felt like being trapped between hope and fear. When Ayana finally appeared at the edge of the trees, his breath caught in his chest. She walked slowly, her steps uncertain. When she reached him, she didn't smile like she usually did. Instead, she looked down, twisting her fingers nervously. Thomas gently lifted her chin so she would meet his eyes. "What happened?" he asked in a quiet voice. She tried to explain with the words she knew. She told him about the elders, the whispers, the anger. Her voice trembled like a leaf in the wind. Thomas listened carefully, his heart aching. He didn't care about rules or old beliefs, he only cared about her. He placed his hand over hers. "I'll be here," he whispered. "I won't leave you." Even though she didn't understand every word, she understood the promise in his voice. Ayana wanted to believe that promise would be enough. As the days passed, the mood in the village grew heavier. The elders met again and again, their voices firm and final. They believed that if they didn't act, their old ways would weaken. They said that love between their people and the settlers would only bring pain. Some of them were angry. Some were afraid. But all of them agreed on one thing. Something had to be done. Ayana's father avoided her eyes. It hurt him deeply to see his daughter caught between her heart and her people. He wanted to protect her, but he was only one man. The elders had the power to make decisions for everyone. Her mother wept quietly at night, holding Ayana close as if time could somehow pause and save them from what was coming. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Ayana overheard the elders' decision. They spoke about making an example, about showing everyone what happens when old rules are broken. She stood frozen in the shadows, her breath shaking. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about a lesson they wanted to give to everyone else. Ayana ran from the edge of the firelight and straight toward the river. Thomas saw her running toward him in the fading light, her hair flying in the wind, her steps desperate. She fell into his arms, her chest rising and falling fast. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to explain. She didn't have all the English words, but Thomas understood from her eyes alone. His heart tightened like a knot. He had known their love was dangerous, but he had never imagined it would lead to this moment. He held her close, whispering soft words of comfort. "We'll find a way," he said. "I'll take you away from here if I have to." She closed her eyes and rested her forehead against his chest. She didn't want to leave her home, but she also didn't want to lose him. For the first time, the weight of their love felt too heavy for her young heart to carry. The night was long. Neither of them spoke much. They just held on to each other as if the world might fall apart at sunrise. The stars above were bright and endless, but the air carried a quiet fear that neither of them could shake. The next morning, everything changed. The village was restless. The elders gathered the people and called for Ayana. Her father walked behind her silent, his face pale with worry. Her mother followed with shaking hands. Ayana's heart pounded like a drum as she stepped into the open space at the center of the village. She felt dozens of eyes on her. Some people looked sad. Some looked cold. Others looked away completely. She stood alone. The elders spoke for a long time. Their voices were strong and clear. They said that rules must not be forgotten. They said that love must not divide their people. They spoke about respect, honor, and the future. Ayana listened quietly, her head held high. She didn't speak back. She didn't cry. She simply stood still like a tree that refused to bend in the wind. As the sun climbed higher, word of what was happening spread beyond the village. Someone carried the news to the settlers. Thomas heard the whispers and ran to the river, his heart pounding. He saw the people gathering on the other side, saw Ayanna standing alone in front of them. He felt fear fill his chest like a wave. He didn't know how to stop what was happening, but he knew he couldn't stand by and do nothing. Thomas found a high place near the edge of the river where he could see everything. The desert wind pressed against his face as he tried to steady his breath. His hands trembled slightly. He wasn't a warrior, he wasn't a leader, but in that moment he was a man who loved someone more than himself. And love, real love, made him brave. In the village, Ayanna closed her eyes. She thought of the river, of the quiet evenings when she and Thomas sat together watching the sky turn gold. She thought of how happy she felt in those moments. Even now, surrounded by cold stares, that memory warmed her heart. She reminded herself that she had chosen love and she didn't regret it. The elders began their ceremony. The people watched silently. Some of them believed it was right. Others wished it didn't have to happen. Ayanna's mother held her hands to her chest, praying quietly that her daughter would not feel pain or fear. Ayanna's father stood still, torn between duty and love, a storm of emotion behind his quiet face. From the ridge, Thomas focused on Ayanna. He could see her face clearly now. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She stood with quiet strength, and in that moment, she looked more beautiful to him than ever before. He whispered softly to himself, "I promised you I wouldn't let you suffer." His chest rose and fell slowly as he held his breath. The world seemed to grow still. Even the wind slowed down. The crowd held their silence. Thomas knew what he had to do. His hands stopped shaking. His eyes stayed fixed on her, the girl who had changed everything for him. He wanted to give her peace even if he couldn't give her forever. He whispered a quiet goodbye, though she couldn't hear it. Ayanna lifted her head and looked toward the horizon. Her heart felt calm. She didn't know what Thomas was planning, but she trusted him. She had always trusted him. She closed her eyes and let the wind touch her face one last time. A soft sound broke the silence, a single sound that carried through the air like a whisper, and then everything became quiet again. The people stood in stunned stillness. Ayanna's body grew still too, like a soft leaf settling gently on the water. The storm inside the village suddenly faded, replaced by a silence so deep it felt endless. Thomas lowered his head, a single tear escaping down his cheek. He had kept his promise. He had made sure she would not feel pain. His heart felt both broken and full. The love they shared was something no rule, no wall, and no fear could erase. As the sun set that day, the desert looked the same as it always had, wide, endless, and quiet. But something had changed forever. In the years to come, people whispered their story around fires. Some said it was a tragedy. Others said it was a love that refused to bow to fear. And somewhere in the wind that moved through the trees at night, people said they could still feel the quiet strength of the Apache girl who loved a man the world said she shouldn't. Thomas never forgot her. He kept the little carved stone heart she had given him, holding it close whenever the world grew silent. He visited the river often, sitting alone on the smooth stones where they once laughed. Though she was gone, the love they shared stayed with him, soft, steady, and unbroken. And so their story lived on. Not in anger, not in hate, but in the quiet memory of two hearts that found each other in a world that didn't understand them. It became a reminder that love, even when it's tested, has a power that no rule can truly erase.